Hey there and welcome back to another Dreamworks video. Now recently, we saw the release of the latest installment in both the Puss in Boots and Shrek franchises with the release of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which serves to both wrap up the storyline set up in the first Puss in Boots film, giving the series context as to where in the timeline it sits, as well as leading into the brand new Shrek film. And it kind of seems like it's a new age for Dreamworks, so get hyped. Anyway, the film tells the story of Puss in Boots, obviously, and is set sometime after the end of Shrek Forever After. Whilst his friends are living their domestic lives in Far, Far Away and beyond, Puss has continued his life of adventure, and is a beloved hero wherever he goes. After defeating a giant in a random town, he's crushed by a bell, killing him, and when he awakes, he's told he's on his last life. At first, he brushes off the doctor's warnings, but after being easily defeated in a duel against a wolf whom he mistakes as a bounty hunter, he decides to fake his death and retire to Mama Luna's cat sanctuary, where he falls into a deep depression. Over time, he begrudgingly befriends a chihuahua whom he names Perito, and he settles in for his twilight years, only for a gang consisting of Goldilocks and the Three Bears to bust in, demanding to know where he is, as they want his help stealing from Big Jack Horner, a big-time gangster. The plan is for them to steal a map that leads to a fallen star, from which they can make any wish they choose. However, they don't find him. They only find his fake grave, and so they leave, assuming he's dead. But meanwhile, Puss realizes that this is his chance to get those lives back. His chance to become the hero that he was before. And so he goes off on an adventure to steal the map himself, with Perito following along. At the heist itself, it turns out his ex-fiancée, Kitty Softpaws, is also trying to steal the map, so that she can wish for somebody that she can trust. And so the pair team up to escape from both Jack Horner and Goldilocks and the Bears, with all the competing parties making their way into the Dark Forest, where they have to follow deadly paths decided by the map for whoever holds it, and thus they give Perito the map, since he has a happy path. After a series of confrontations, they lose the map to Goldilocks, and have to work together to get it back, only for Puss to double-cross Kitty when he meets the wolf again, who's revealed to be the embodiment of death. And thus he makes his way to the star, and is confronted by everybody. They all battle, Jack gets tossed in his bottomless bag, the Bears and Goldilocks give up when they realise how close they were to actually dying, with Goldilocks realising that her true family were the Bears all along. Death then arrives, and Puss gives up the map to duel him alone, and although he loses, he proves that he's changed as a person, and thus Death decides to leave him alone for now. Jack returns using growth serum, and they kill him by destroying the map, which makes the star crumble in on itself, with the resulting energy evaporating him. Kitty and Puss reconcile, and it's a happy ending for everybody, and they finish off travelling to Far, Far Away, setting up a future Shrek movie. And yeah, coming into this film, I was not expecting this. I was thinking, it's been over a decade between installments, I'm not sure how this is going to go. New team, the first one was decent but nothing special, and Dreamworks hasn't really been making my favourite content recently, and so I kind of thought it would be simply okay. But yeah, I was wrong. This movie's weirdly good, like absurdly good. Currently, as of writing this, it's sitting on a 95% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes from critics, and a 98% approval rating from audiences, which, well, I thought the days of a Shrek-affiliated property doing so well were well and truly over, but here we are. It's done well for itself, and I expect it to do well at the box office too. It's truly a great film, and great in so many different ways. And obviously, we've walked through the narrative just now, and so I guess we'll start there. The story itself is fun and engaging, and I was really impressed by how the film wasn't afraid to tackle more difficult and darker subject matter than you would normally see in a film of this type. Depression, the breakdown of relationships and rekindling of love, overcoming arrogance and finding new self-worth, coming to terms with dying. These are concepts that are all explored simply through Puss's personal arc, and it's done in a way that's one part dramatic, one part emotional, and then one part comedic, just to prevent things getting too dark. And whilst it was a little bit annoying to go back to the classic trope of breaking up the love interest off screen between installments so you can rehash the old story points in the sequel, I think it was still handled quite well, all things considered. The romance felt natural. Another thing I enjoyed in terms of story and character development was the variety in characters. You have Kitty and Perito, who I'd argue are the clean-cut, baby-faced heroes of the story. They're purely good. Yeah, they have their own goals and agendas, but they don't pursue them at the cost of those they care about. Kitty just wants to be able to find her person, somebody she can trust and that will care for her. Perito wants a family. And then there's Puss, who's less heroic. He's still the main protagonist, don't get me wrong, but he's not as much of a hero here. For much of the film, he's out for himself. He wants things to go back to how they were before. He doesn't want to have to grow or change, and thus he wants the wish. And over time, he starts to develop, and as his arc progresses, we see him become more and more heroic. Then there are the antagonists. Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And they're kind of like Puss. They're antagonists and they're obstacles, but they're not really true villains. They have selfish goals, but they're not evil. They love each other, they have depth, and in the end they help Puss and Kitty stop Jack Horner. And then there's Jack Horner himself, and he's just an irredeemable villain. The classic type that you see a lot of in things like Shrek, like Lord Farquaad or the Fairy Godmother. Someone out for themselves and who doesn't care about who gets hurt from their actions. And then they complete the character alignment rainbow with the character of Death, who's simply an amoral force of nature. And I think this variety of characters helps to add a lot of emotional depth to the story. Plus, I really enjoyed how the different story arcs of all the different characters intertwined. I think it was quite impressive to have that many competing story threads, and yet to have them all feel fleshed out and engaging. Moving on, you obviously can't talk about a Shrek spin-off without delving into the comedic side of things. And yeah, this film was actually quite funny. It felt more akin to Shrek 1 and 2, where there were lots of absurd moments and references that you wouldn't expect, whilst also leaning on bringing in some darker elements as well, darker humour. And of course, this is a Shrek spin-off, so there was toilet humour, but it was handled well. It wasn't oversaturated and it didn't overstay its welcome. And thus, I think the film turned out to be one of DreamWorks' funniest in years, in my opinion. Between this and then The Bad Guys, I'm hoping that we're turning the corner for DreamWorks and we see a bit of a resurgence around the 2020s. But I guess that's going to remain to be seen. The soundtrack was also good, the acting was good, and nothing hugely special except for Puss. Antonio, bringing the goods once again. Antonio as Puss in Boots has got to be one of the most iconic voice performances in history, in my opinion. Perfection. And of course, this brings us to the animation and visual style. Now, it's been openly stated that both Bad Guys and then Puss in Boots: The Last Wish have drawn heavily from Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. And you can really tell. And I think it was DreamWorks' best decision since they first started working with 3D animation techniques back in the early 2000s. I wouldn't say that DreamWorks is getting stale, but you could really start to see the difference between the visual quality of Pixar and Walt Disney and then DreamWorks. And so, by adopting this more storybook style, I think it's just enhanced everything, especially the action. The characters feel like living paintings, like they've come right off the page of a storybook as opposed to being characters from a film. And I think it just adds another dimension in the narrative itself and enhances the overall quality of the film. Hyperrealism's fun. It's exciting. It's a marvel and it's always fun to see, but it feels like it is becoming a bit of a crutch. Studios are constantly showing off how visually impressive they are, showing off their technological advancements, and yet by doing so, letting the story somewhat fall by the wayside. But here, DreamWorks is choosing to use a style which ties into the way their story functions. A style that fits the world and the characters far more. Something that complements the story and doesn't try to outshine it. And so now I'm quite excited to see where DreamWorks is going to go from here. They have a lot of work in the pipeline, and I'm most eagerly anticipating Shrek and Kung Fu Panda. I think they're going to both benefit greatly from this new visual style, as long as they have good scripts. And honestly, especially Kung Fu Panda. This type of visual style feels tailor-made for Kung Fu Panda. And so yeah, that's the end of the video. Puss in Boots 2. It's awesome. Would recommend. And so with all that being said, these were just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the film if you've seen it? You like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.